and welcome to another episode of Superheroes, Movies, and Superhero Movies. I'm Justin Speck.
I'm John Pelzo.
And today we're going to be talking about Spider-Man 2 from 2004, directed by Sam Raimi, starring Tobey Maguire, Kirsten Dunst, James Franco, Alfred Molina, with a cameo by Willem Dafoe.
Yeah.
And J.K. Simmons, of course. Can't forget J.K. Simmons. This one was written by Alvin Sargent with a story by Alfred Goff and Miles Miller and Michael Chabon, if I remember that correctly. Before we get started, I actually would like to give a little shout-out to somebody who gave us a nice review on iTunes. I got to pull this up real quick.
By the way, while you're doing that, I wanted to point out that for those of you who don't know, I don't think we mentioned it. If anyone listened to our commentary, Justin is visiting Atlanta, and we're actually able to do this podcast face to face.
It's really weird.
It is weird. We don't have to clap to sync our audio.
No, I don't think we could have done the commentary. The commentary, I think, would be very difficult to do via Skype.
Mm-hmm. It can be done, but
I think it'd be tough to sync the movie up. Either I would have, and plus the audio, because like you can hear the movie on the commentary track. So I wonder if you would hear like my movie on my audio and your movie on your audio, and if it wasn't synced up correctly, I don't know. But we'll have to give it a shot, I guess. I mean, we might have to give it a shot if we do another one. So
I would like to do it in the commentary.
I would too. It was a lot of fun. So I want to give it a little shout out, thank you to RyDog138 with 2 G's, RyDog138. He gave us a 5-star review on iTunes, and the title of his review was entertaining with 3 exclamation points, which was very nice. And he said, "These guys seem about the same age as me, so it's fun to hear them reminisce about some of the older movies from the 80s and 90s. Very enjoyable to listen to."
Nice.
So we appreciate that.
Yeah,
Dog.
That's one of our goals is, we focus a lot on
nostalgia, kind of, yeah. Yeah, I agree.
And we're going to be hitting a lot of the newer movies. We've done a couple.
Right. Some movies like Dredd. We talked about Dredd, and we had no...
yeah, that was my first time seeing Dredd.
Yeah, and neither of us... You hadn't seen Judge Dredd, had you?
I still haven't seen Judge Dredd.
I did. I finally tracked it down and watched it.
Those of you who don't know, the Sylvester Stallone version, which came out in the...
95, I think.
Yeah.
Real quick, I'll just say, it's a terrible movie, but I actually kind of enjoyed it. But I think it's because I was on a Judge Dredd kick for a while there. So anyway, we're talking about Spider-Man 2 today. And this movie came out in 2004, and it was the highly anticipated, I will say, from at least on my end.
Oh, yeah.
Highly anticipated follow-up to 2002's Spider-Man, which I thought was an awesome superhero film. And
we really didn't have that many to compare it to at the time.
No, we really didn't. I mean, we had X-Men, and X-Men 2 was what, 2003? So it was a year after Spider-Man?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we really only had X-Men and
X-Men and Spider-Man.
Yeah, and I guess the older Superman and Batman movies.
Right. But the first Spider-Man movie, well, really X-Men, kind of created a new design for what these movies were going to be.
Right.
The X-Men movies, the Spider-Man movies, they don't really compare to the Batman and Superman movies.
It's really hard to compare them. Superman is kind of a lighter character, but those movies are just so much older that when Spider-Man 2 or even when Spider-Man 1 came out, it's like you can't really compare it to Batman because Spider-Man is such kind of a lighter character too, but you have a hard time comparing it to Superman because the movies are so much older. So Spider-Man 2 comes out. Well, first of all, let's back up a little bit. And I remember when they announced that Spider-Man 2, the villain for Spider-Man 2 was going to be Doc Ock. Mm-hmm. And I've talked to you about this before, and I'm just going to bring it up again here. I remember the first actor that came to mind that I thought would be great for Doc Ock was Sam Neill from Jurassic Park, Alan Grant. And it's strictly, I think, just based off of kind of the look of Doc Ock from the old comics and the animated series and stuff. I just, for whatever reason, I was like, Sam Neill would be perfect as Doc Ock, and I still think he would have been good around that time, too, about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But apparently nobody agreed with me, and they went with Alfred Molina, who actually was great as Doc Ock.
Oh, he's amazing.
I have no complaints there.
As far as predicting who would play a great villain, I remember thinking Kevin Spacey would be amazing as Lex Luthor. And they picked him.
Yep.
I couldn't believe that one. That was a dream come true, and he did a good job. I
agree. I remember reading somewhere that people didn't like Kevin Spacey as Lex Luthor. They thought he was, or maybe it was a friend of mine who said it. They thought he was like too campy or something. But I thought he was, perfect in that movie. Personally, I mean that's a podcast I can't wait to talk about because I have my views on Superman Returns, but
it's been a while since I've watched it. I've got my views.
It'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to talk about it again. One of the first things that I noticed when I saw this movie in the theater, well, number one, as soon as the opening credits start, you see Alex Ross's paintings of the events from the first movie. Mm-hmm. And that I thought was just gorgeous. Like every single new painting that came up that was some representation of a scene from the first movie, I was like, I want that on my wall. I want that on my wall.
I didn't know it was Alex Ross.
It was, yeah. It's Alex Ross. And so it was really good. And then you got Danny Elfman's score and everything. It was perfect. But I remember being disappointed in the very, very beginning because I didn't know any better yet. Mm-hmm. I was like, I hope, because I hadn't done any research on it or anything. I guess, I don't know how often I went to IMDb 10 years ago. I might not have done that much.
Yeah.
It seems like it was...
I don't even think I knew about it.
Yeah, so I'm not even sure I did either. So I remember hoping during the credits, I was like, please be written by David Koepp, who wrote the first one. It's like, please be written by David Koepp. And it comes up, it says, written by Alvin Sargent. I'd never even heard of Alvin Sargent before. And I was like, what? And so I was instantly cautious, I would say, maybe, to get because even though I was very excited about the sequel, I was nervous once I saw that it was written by somebody else.
So you didn't find out about it being written by someone else until you were watching it in the theater?
I remember watching it in the theater, yeah, and finding out that it was written by somebody else.
That just goes 10-year difference.
Yeah, I know, right?
It's amazing how far we've come in 10 years.
I know.
It's crazy. now we know the names of the characters in the new Star Wars
right
film
a year before it comes out. Yeah. And same with you look at Batman versus Superman. That doesn't come out till March of 2016, and we already know a good chunk of it anyway, like who's writing it and who's playing who and whatnot. So yeah, a big difference in 10 years. And like I said, that's why I don't know. I'm sure IMDb was around, but I just wasn't aware of it, or I wasn't using it as much.
It would have been fairly new, not very popular. I remember when I was going to it, I don't think it was very well known either.
And they might not have updated their information as it's possible that they didn't know who the writer was yet for Spider-Man 2 before the movie came out. I don't know. So I really can't remember, but I do remember waiting to see who wrote the movie in the opening credits, and it was Alvin Sargent. But thankfully, Alvin Sargent is an awesome writer, and he did an excellent job with Spider-Man 2.
What else has he done?
I had to kind of look him up after Spider-Man 2, and he wrote one of my favorite movies, which was Ordinary People, which was back from 1980. Won Best Picture in 1980. He won an Oscar, actually, for Best Adapted Screenplay for it. And it was Robert Redford's directorial debut. It's the first movie Robert Redford ever directed. Based on a book, really well written. Alvin Sargent was he's 87 years old now, so he was 77 when he wrote Spider-Man 2, or 76, I would say, probably. So, he was an older guy writing a superhero movie, and he did an incredible job.
Yeah.
You do have to give credit to Alfred Goff and Miles Miller and Michael Chabon, who came up with the story. Alfred Goff and Miles Miller, or Millar, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, were the showrunners for Smallville. They created Smallville and ran that show for most of its run. But they also don't have the greatest writing credits. They wrote Lethal Weapon 4, which was pretty good. Mm-hmm. Well, from what I remember, I haven't seen that movie in forever.
I don't know if I've ever seen a Lethal Weapon movie.
Really?
Yeah,
they're pretty good. You should check them out.
What's funny is that in Maverick,
yeah, where they run into each other. Yeah,
I had no idea what that was. Okay,
they look at each other, do a double take.
Yeah,
nah. Yeah, you should know. Lethal Weapon 1 especially is really, really good. Lethal Weapon, I think I marathoned them, so like 2 and 3 kind of blend together for me. And 4, I remember seeing, I think I saw 1, I think I'd always seen part 1, like either on TV or something. And so, but then I saw 4 before I saw part 2 and 3. It doesn't really matter. But part 4 was written by them, but Mummy 3 was also written by them, which apparently was pretty bad. But Michael Chabon, if I'm pronouncing that name correctly, is a novelist who doesn't really have, as far as I know, too many screenwriting credits, but is more, writes novels. And so it was kind of surprising to see his name on the story credit. So maybe he's just a lifelong Spider-Man fan or something and had an idea. But Alvin Sargent took that story and he turned it into something incredible. For the longest time, I considered this to be the greatest superhero film of all time.
Yeah.
Before other superhero movies came out.
It's still way up there for me. I'd have to really think about it to place it.
For me, I think the way it would still make it into my like top 5 for sure, but I would have to condense. The Dark Knight is probably going to be the number 1 for me.
That's me. I think that's mine too.
But I think I'd almost want to, because Batman Begins I think would also be on that list, and even I still root for The Dark Knight Rises. I know there's people who now looking back on it kind of are like, it wasn't that great, but I still think it was amazing. So I'd almost have to clump it into the trilogy and just say the Dark Knight trilogy is number 1. And that way I could have like Spider-Man 2 probably be number 2.
Before I decided that Jurassic Park was my favorite movie of all time, it was the Star Wars trilogy.
Right.
The original, of course.
So I think some of those movies you just kind of almost have to do that with.
Yeah.
Lord of the Rings even almost kind of fits into that because it does kind of feel like one.
And they did,
movie.
and they did that with the awards. You know, they shunned them the first 2
years,
and then the third one just swept the awards,
right?
Which was pretty crazy to watch because I remember sitting there thinking, this is the last year. They're going to do it again.
Did you watch it? Because I remember watching that awards at my house. Were you there? Did you watch it at my house? I remember having friends there, and they didn't.
What year was it?
It was 2003. Well, I guess it would have been like early 2004.
Were we? No, we were roommates the following year.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I was or not.
I don't remember. I remember our friend Chris was there, and I remember a couple other people were there, and they just seemed completely not interested in the Oscars. And I was like the only one really watching it. But yeah, that's. I remember that was almost kind of that was one of the more boring Oscar telecasts.
Because
they won every single award. It was like
Return of the King.
Yeah, every time Return of the King was nominated, it was Return of the King won.
The 13th award, Return of the King.
And Return of the King. Well, that last award would be Best Picture, so everybody went nuts, but yeah.
Yeah, true.
But yeah, they absolutely, you could tell that they were absolutely, awarding the trilogy. I mean, Return of the King is a great movie, but I think they were really like, you did something amazing with the trilogy.
Yeah.
And we're now showing you the love you deserve, I guess, especially since they didn't give it to him. I would have been mad, though, if Fellowship had won in 2001 and Two Towers had won in 2002
right.
and Return of the King had won in 2003. I'd have been like,
yeah.
So I'm glad it didn't work that way.
It's almost like they planned it, but how did they know
that it would have been that good?
Yeah. Let's get back to Spider-Man 2. I want to talk about seeing the movie. What are your memories of seeing Spider-Man 2?
Well, I remember sitting in the theater and watching it, but then
That's a good one.
Yeah. The other memory I have is standing outside the theater after the movie, and I was talking to a friend of mine who he didn't come with us. We just happened to be at the same screening. I can't remember his name. It's been driving me nuts. But I remember being in love with the movie from the get-go. As soon as it was over, I was like, that was amazing.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure you felt that way.
Yes.
And I think the other friend that we went with, they felt that way. But
Was it Dips? Dips went with us. I remember that.
And Chris was there too, and I think they both liked it, if I recall. But this other friend of ours that showed up, we were like, "What'd you think of the movie, man?" And he was like, he shook his head.
What?
And he's like, "I didn't care for it." And and that's kind of my reaction. I was like, how can you say that? And he was like, man, it was all talk about, like, do you love me, do you not love me, for, like, 2 hours and, like, such little action. And I was like...
Such little action.
Yeah, and I remember just being like, how can you not like this movie? But then he went on his way, and he... whatever. And watching it again today... and even watching it after he had said that and everything, because I think I probably went and saw it in the theater again, I'm sure.
I did.
There is that back and forth, but it's so necessary, you know?
Yeah.
And it's the characters are so just well written and well kind of developed in this movie that first of all, I don't think there's too little action in the film. I think it has just the right amount of action. Yeah. And I think it has just the right amount of kind of love story / unrequited love, you know, on Peter's part. It's actually, you know, it's heartbreaking, really. I think it tugs at the heartstrings a little bit to see Peter want to tell Mary Jane that why he can't be with her, and that he does want to be with her, and but he can't. You know, it's really. And
every time it's right on one side, it just isn't working on the other.
Right.
And it happens so many times.
And then I think because of that, because of the kind of back and forth, the reveal at the end, where she sees him without his mask on, is so much more impactful.
Yeah, and rewarding.
Yeah, exactly, because you see it on her face. Because, like, we as an audience, we know he's Spider-Man. And we just are like, oh, if you could only understand Mary Jane. And then at the end she does, and it is rewarding. Exactly, it's amazing. I guess now would be a good time to say we're going to talk about the whole movie. So if you haven't seen Spider-Man 2, you might want to check it out because spoiler alert. Sorry about that.
I've got memories. I went to Walmart probably a week or so before the movie release and went and bought a Spider-Man 2 shirt.
I remember that.
It actually
said
that. Spider-Man 2 on the shirt.
Nice.
And then, you, Dips, Chris, I don't remember anyone else.
I don't remember either.
There probably were a couple more, but went. And I went to the concession stand and got some Spider-Man 2 gummies.
Nice.
And sat down with my Spider-Man 2 shirt with this huge grin on my face waiting for Spider-Man 2 to start.
Did we give you grief about that? Did we give you grief about...
I'm pretty sure you did.
I'm pretty sure we did too, because back then, I remember back then we used to go to bands concert, like local band concerts all the time, and it was very... it was a faux pas, I guess, to wear the band shirt to the band's show.
Right.
And so I guess in our brains it was... like wearing the band shirt to the band show to the movie. And so I remember giving you grief about that, but I do that all the time now.
Yeah, I didn't care. I was like, I got a Spider-Man 2 shirt, guys.
Like, I'm cooler than all of them. They just recently, the theater by my apartment in California showed the original Batman. Uh-huh. And I wore a Batman shirt to that. And like as I was walking in, the guy that was tearing the ticket was like, "Here to see Batman, huh?" And I was like, "Yep."
I wore Superman to Superman Returns. I don't know.
I wore Superman to Man of Steel.
I don't remember if I did the Man of Steel. I was trying to think about that.
But you also have to you have to wear those shirts like on opening day.
Yeah, exactly.
Like if you just go, I guess I did it to Batman, the original Batman. But I mean, if you kind of just go in like the middle of the week by yourself, I mean, you got to show your love for like the opening night. You know.
Revenge of the Sith, I went and bought a Star Wars shirt.
Nice.
It wasn't a Revenge of the Sith shirt, but it was a Star Wars shirt. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I remember that. That's funny. I totally forgot about your Spider-Man 2 shirt, but I remember that now, and I remember giving you grief about it when I apologize. We shouldn't have done that.
That's okay.
I'm glad it didn't affect you at all.
It did not. I didn't care at all.
So I think it's interesting with Spider-Man 2 that if you look at the cast now, 10 years later, the one who we seem to see the most of, and I would say is probably the most famous, is James Franco. Mm-hmm. Harry Osborn is now a movie star. I mean, he was a movie star, I guess, if you think about it with Spider-Man, but he wasn't Spider-Man. You'd think Tobey Maguire would have had maybe more of a... And I know Tobey Maguire's had kids, and he's taking time off from movies to be with his family and everything. But it's interesting to see how Harry Osborn has now become the most famous person out of this cast.
I didn't know who he was before seeing Spider-Man.
I knew who he was because of a TV show called Freaks and Geeks, which is on Netflix and it's a great show. It's actually got a lot of those. Seth Rogen is on it. Jason Segel, Marshall from How I Met Your Mother's on it, and so those three guys, like all those guys who are always in like Judd Apatow movies. So I knew and I watched that in high school, mainly because I had a crush on Linda Cardellini at the time. I didn't know. I mean, like James Franco and Seth Rogen, they weren't. I thought they were okay on the show, but I didn't really give them much thought. That's not why I watched it. Mm-hmm. I watched it because it was funny and because I thought she was hot. But but then because of Spider-Man, like I was like, I recognize that guy, and like I think it took me a while to figure out who it was, but I do remember him from Freaks and Geeks. But yeah, at the time he was essentially a nobody, especially when the first Spider-Man came out.
Yeah.
And I don't really remember if he did a whole lot in between Spider-Mans.
I don't think he did. I think it was after Spider-Man 3 probably is really when he did Pineapple Express with Seth Rogen.
Yeah.
And some other thing.
And then, when he got nominated for an Oscar for 127 Hours and all that.
Yeah, that's not important.
Right. But I can't even, like, the last Tobey Maguire movie that had, like, a big release anyways, that I can think of, and I could be wrong here, is Brothers, where he played, like, the missing...
Right. Jake Gyllenhaal.
Yeah. Which was a pretty good movie. And he got a Golden Globe nomination for it, and it was, like, looking like he was maybe going to get an Oscar nomination for it, but as far as I can remember, that's, like, the last thing I think I've seen him in. Mm-hmm. So he's really taken a break, which, you gotta respect that. He wants to be with his family and everything. But anyway, it's just funny. If you had asked me 10 years ago who's going to be the most famous 10 years from now, I would have said Tobey Maguire.
Right. J.K. Simmons.
J.K. Simmons, I will not be surprised, and I hope he does, gets an Oscar nomination this year. Uh-huh. His movie Whiplash that is out in theaters right now is incredible. It's probably it's definitely going to be in my top 10 list of the year, but as of right now, it might be close to my favorite movie of the year. Well, not including some of the summer blockbuster movies. Like, out of the Oscar season movies, I think Whiplash is probably one of my favorites. But his performance in it is amazing. And he already got a Screen Actors Guild nomination, so I'm sure he'll get, like, a Golden Globe nomination, and I wouldn't be surprised if he gets an Oscar nomination. Will he win? I don't know. Mm-hmm. He's got some competition, so we'll see. One of the things I love about superhero sequels is that we got that pesky origin story out of the way.
Yes.
And so that's one of my favorite things about sequels is you can go in and he's going to be Spider-Man right off the bat.
Right. And he was, but it was different.
It was a little different.
He's a pizza delivery guy.
Right.
And he uses his Spider-Man outfit
to deliver
pizza.
Or to attempt to deliver pizza on time. Because apparently this is like the one pizza place in New York that still has the 30 minutes or it's free guarantee. But because he's Spider-Man, because he has great power and great responsibility, sometimes disturbances happen.
That's right. That's right. What was it, a robbery?
In the very beginning?
Yeah.
I don't recall. He shows up. I mean, it kind of, the movie opens, he's thinking about Mary Jane.
Right.
And then he shows up at the pizza place, and he just says there was a disturbance, and he puts his Spider-Man mask back in his pocket. Right. But then on the way to deliver the pizzas, there's the kids playing in the street that he has to stop. And
that's right.
That might be it. Might just have been that part. But just, one thing is enough, Mm. So he's late delivering the pizzas, of course.
Right. The closet scene is quite funny.
And the woman that plays the receptionist there, that's Emily Deschanel, who's from Bones, if you watch Bones now. It was obviously before Bones, but that's also Zooey Deschanel's older sister.
Gotcha. That was Bones is done by what's his name? Mulholland Drive.
David Lynch?
Yeah.
Is it really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
I believe it is.
Weird. All right.
We'll go with that.
Sure. Let's go with that.
Okay.
David Lynch produces Bones, I guess. Interesting. I'm surprised the show's not weirder.
I've never seen it, so
It's kind of it's like a CSI type show, you know. I think her nickname is Bones because she's like a bone specialist or something. I think they work for the Smithsonian or something like that. Something weird.
maybe I'm wrong here.
There
Might be another one I'm thinking
be.
of. Is there a show called Numbers?
Yes, but that was produced by the Scott brothers, Tony Scott and Ridley Scott.
Okay.
Unless David Lynch was also a part of that.
Moving on.
All right, whatever. That opening scene is pretty great, and you see that he's struggling, you know? He's struggling to kind of find a balance between being Peter Parker and being Spider-Man. And that even shows when he's late to his own... He forgets it's his birthday, actually. When he gets to Aunt May's house, they're throwing him a birthday party, and he's like... I think he says, "What's the occasion?"
Right, he does.
Like, he doesn't even remember that it's his own birthday.
Yeah. And you've got...
He's struggling with school.
You've got Harry there.
Yeah.
And Mary Jane. Harry he conveys his lingering anger over Spider-Man. Kind of throwing out, you know, what do you...
Taking pictures of your friend.
Yeah. So that's fun part. You know, you get that feeling that there's going to be some conflict here between these two friends. But then again, Harry mentions he hasn't seen him around.
Right.
So, you know, they're kind of off doing their own thing.
Harry has really kind of taken control of his dad's company in this movie, too.
Yeah.
He was kind of the rich kid, you know, in the first movie, but now that his father has died, he's really kind of tried to become a bit of an... He's a little bit of a kid still. He still has little kind of childlike complaints here and there. But he's really trying his best to take over his father's company and do important work. And that's why he's also kind of investing in Dr. Octavius's work and all that.
Right. And, I find it interesting you bring up the little kid bit because during the scene where the... what do you call it? The contraption that Octavius
The
built.
machine?
Yeah,
I don't know.
the
Yeah.
machine. When he's like trying to turn that off, he's throwing a little temper tantrum. You know, it's my money.
Yeah.
So very, very kid-like personality.
And right after that scene, that's the scene I was thinking of. Right after that, he's like, "I'm ruined. Spider-Man has ruined me." Like, I thought that
He humiliated me by touching me.
Yeah. That was just very. All right, you know, settle down.
Yeah.
Mary Jane is also at the party, and she seems to actually be doing pretty well. She was struggling to be an actress in the first movie, and now she's actually a part of an actual Broadway play.
Mm-hmm. Was she an actress in the first one?
She was trying. Remember, she tells Peter that she went on an audition for a soap opera, and they told her that she needed acting lessons.
That's right.
So she was waitressing, but she was really trying to be an actress. And I remember she also told him something about wanting to be an actress in the first movie, and he was like, "You were great in that third grade play," or something like that, you know.
Yeah. I cried like a baby.
Right, yeah. So she's actually, you know, she's kind of living her dream. She's on, I think it's The Importance of Being Earnest, and she really wants Peter to come see her perform.
And he's missing out.
And he tries for lack, you know, it's not for lack of trying though. He tries to get there, but he just can never make it.
The second cameo of Bruce Campbell,
right, which is great. Thanks to Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell's lifelong friendship. That's a great scene too, and I like how Bruce Campbell clearly he's coming in to see the play, but he's like, shoelace, and then he's like, "You might want to straighten up your tie a little bit," and then he goes, "May I help you?" And I remember when I think it was the Comic-Con for Spider-Man 3, I heard like a interview footage or something with him where people were asking Bruce Campbell who he was going to play in the third movie. Because I remember there was a lot of rumors that he was going to be like Mysterio or something.
That's right, I remember
like he was going to be like an actual villain, which I think would have been, well, number one, having Mysterio in the movie as well would have been terrible. But him playing a villain, I think, should have happened, honestly.
Yeah.
And he said that he goes, "I'll give you a hint." now looking back on it, it's really kind of terrible because the scene he was in. I mean, it was funny, but it was not nearly as cool as we were all hoping it would be. But he was like, in the first movie, I named Spider-Man. And then he says, in the second movie, I defeated Spider-Man. Which I always thought was funny because he doesn't let him in the theater. And then he was like, in the third movie, I think he says, I team up with Spider-Man or something like that. So everybody was like, really, oh, what does that mean? And it was just him playing the maitre d' at the restaurant, helping him try to propose to Mary Jane.
That's right. See, I didn't really remember that scene.
Well, it's not nearly. I mean, out of those 3 cameos, I mean, you got to like him as the wrestling announcer. But but the second, in my opinion, the best Bruce Campbell cameo out of the trilogy is part 2.
It's a good one.
Yeah, because he's just so uppity or whatever, you know.
He's very Bruce Campbell.
He's very Bruce Campbellish, which is great. He does it great, perfect job. In the scene where Doc Ock is building the machine, right, and he's presenting it to everyone. He talks about the tritium and like the tritium, how it kind of like powers the machine. Mm-hmm. Well, he says thanks to Oscorp for supplying it.
Right.
But he goes, there's only 25 pounds of tritium on the planet. My question is, how can you be sure that there's only 25 pounds of anything on the whole planet?
Yeah. Maybe he meant that's known.
I'm sure I guess that's what he meant. There's only 25 known pounds on the planet.
Yeah.
But I mean, did you look everywhere?
I love the joke he says.
About the rubber band?
Yes. Did anyone lose a wad of 100 or 20s, whatever it is, wrapped in a rubber band? Well, we found the rubber band. Everyone laughs. He goes, I know, it's a terrible joke. I'm like, no, it's a good one.
It's all right. It's a good joke.
I'm going to use it one day.
I'm sure you will.
I will.
It's interesting getting to see, again, it's just those kind of nice character moments that Alvin Sargent wrote where, like, there's the dinner scene with Peter Parker and Dr. Octavius even before the presentation. And Dr. Octavius knows through Dr. Connors that Peter is brilliant but lazy. Mm-hmm. That's at least what Dr. Connors thinks. And so he's a little tough on Peter at first, here and there. You know, because he doesn't, anybody who is brilliant shouldn't be lazy, and he's trying to kind of push him that way. But I also like how they really kind of form there's a bond there between the two of them, because Peter knows the science, and Dr. Octavius is also a bit of a romantic, and he likes, he doesn't mind giving Peter some advice about, he like, give her poetry or whatever. Right. So I like that. I thought that scene was really well done. So when Dr. Octopus, I guess at the time, he's Dr. Octavius, you had a question when we were watching it, because we actually got to watch this movie together, which was nice. Yeah. Was that your question was that the first time Dr. Octavius ever put those mechanical arms on himself? And I would say there's no way he would do it without testing it first.
Right.
But at the same time, it does really seem like that was the first time he ever did it. But he knows how to use them, like, right away. So I don't know. It's very interesting. It's a good question, because you'd think that there would be, without testing it, you'd think it wouldn't go as smoothly as it does. Because he's able to really use those arms with his mind,
Yeah.
just fine. But you'd think that you'd want to test that out first before doing it in front of a group of people. But I don't know. It's a very good question.
Of course, he has the chip in there to keep it from controlling his brain. So
right.
Very high-tech arms.
Yeah.
I wonder why they would have the ability to control his brain.
I don't know. It's obviously some sort of safeguard, Again, another reason why... Did they test this on somebody else, and those arms controlled him?
They had little miniature ones that they tested on rats.
Right. And they're like, those arms seem to be controlling him, not the other way around. No, that's a good question. I don't know why. I mean, yeah. It's a comic book movie, so you kind of have to go with it. But, I mean, yeah, how did they know that without that safeguard, without that little chip, that the arms could potentially, like, take over his brain, kind of, or brainwash him almost, which is kind of what it does.
Yeah.
Kind of does brainwash him.
I've heard people mention that the arms talk to him, like, and they do, but
He communicates with him, for
right.
sure.
But I think the perception that I've heard from some people is that they've got their own personalities, and you see that when the arms come around and kind of look at them and move their
Yeah, and they're upset at the end.
pinchers. Right. That was kind of weird.
You can almost hear them going like,
Yeah, which didn't make sense. Why?
are they making noise?
No, why are they so determined? Because Peter Parker's talking to Octavius about, shutting it down, the machine.
Yeah.
And he's like, I'm not going to. But then he decides, he's like, no, I will. And that's when the arms are very disappointed in him. And I'm like, what's the motivation of these arms that they don't want the machine destroyed?
That's a good question. My guess is maybe that's because that's what they were built for.
There you go.
Like, I mean, that machine, what was the purpose of that machine? Was it to
Create energy.
create energy? So that the arms were designed to work with that machine. And so that's my guess, is like that's because that's what they were built for. I guess they knew that's what they were built for. Mm-hmm. And so
They wouldn't have a purpose.
without it, they wouldn't have a purpose.
Yeah.
So it's like they don't want to shut down the machine, because then why are they there? That'd be my guess.
Fair enough.
Fair enough.
Back to the first time that they're using the machine. I really liked the dinner scene when I think Peter kind of questions, the safety, and that they mention that he's done his research. His wife mentions that, and then of course it goes wrong,
Right.
and he loses his wife because of this. That was a good touch. You could tell, in the dinner scene that he had a great relationship with his wife.
Right.
That she was probably the only thing that he put above his
His
science.
work.
Yeah.
However, in the end, he put his work above her because, we talk about the arms brainwashing him, but there is a part of Octavius that was perhaps a little irresponsible, perhaps, because he doesn't want to shut down the machine right away, even though because he's going to say it'll stabilize. Everybody else in the room knows that that's not the case.
Right.
Excuse me. And so if he had been smarter, or if he had perhaps maybe looked at his wife and she could have kind of done that, kind of just given him a look, even he would have realized he was putting his wife in danger. But he was more focused on the thing working and stabilizing than being responsible and shutting it down, and it ended up being the death of his wife.
Yeah.
And then the chip explodes, and that's
right.
And then so one of the things I do like about the movie is that he doesn't blame it on Spider-Man. Does he? I mean, Spider-Man pulls the plug and everything, but I don't think he was ever like Spider-Man murdered my wife type of thing.
No, I don't think he was Spider-Man murdered my wife. I think he was mad about Spider-Man shutting down the machine.
Sure, of course.
But you're right. It wasn't so much let's go after Spider-Man.
It wasn't like a revenge story.
Yeah,
after
the
that.
only reason he really went after Spider-Man was because Harry wanted.
He needed the tritium,
and he needed the tritium.
Yep. So that's kind of cool. I kind of like that it didn't turn into like a revenge story, because I feel like we've seen that before in something else. Well, part of it is this movie almost, with Harry Osborn being like, Spider-Man killed my father. And that's something I want to get into later, too, towards the end of the movie when he has that realization. So Dr. Octopus is taken to the hospital, and that is one of my absolutely favorite scenes from this film.
Love it.
Sam Raimi goes back to his horror movie roots.
Yes, he does.
And there's a very Evil Dead-esque horror scene in the hospital involving, and I love that those arms really do have a mind of their own. He's unconscious the whole time.
He is.
And those arms are just taking out the room one by one. And the camera work in that movie, or in that scene, the screaming, I love the raising of the chainsaw. That makes me think of Ash every time. Of course. It's just such a well done scene. It's one of my favorite scenes from that movie, and I think it's so good.
The end shot of that with the cameras of each the four arms, and you just see the eyes.
Yeah.
Kind of that distorted picture coming together. And yeah, it was very, very Sam Raimi horror.
Sam Raimi, after the Spider-Man movies, he did Drag Me to Hell, which, did you see that?
I have. I enjoyed it, but at the same time, I thought it was a little overrated.
Okay. I've only seen it once, and I remember liking it, but it was back in the theater, so I'd really honestly have to revisit it to give you, a good review, I guess. But then he did Oz the Great and Powerful. Did you see that?
I have not seen that one.
My short review would be don't.
Really?
I didn't really care. I didn't like it at all. But this movie really makes me miss Sam Raimi.
Mm-hmm.
I really want to see a Sam Raimi film where he kind of uses these same camera techniques, you know. He had, I feel like when you watch this movie, you can just see Sam Raimi on the other side of the camera having a great time, smiling, you know?
Yeah.
And you don't feel that way during Spider-Man 3.
No.
You might be able to get a little sense of that during Drag Me to Hell. Honestly, I can't really remember. But I didn't feel that way at all during Oz the Great and Powerful either. But it also, Oz the Great and Powerful, from what I remember, doesn't really have those Sam Raimi kind of elements to it. You know, It doesn't have those kind of snap zooms and interesting kind of camera angles and things like that. And, maybe you could say he's maturing as a director, perhaps, but I really think that's kind of I think that's part of Sam Raimi's charm.
Right. The Evil Dead movies were very independent.
Yeah. Even like Darkman I really liked, and it has a lot of those kind of similar styles, elements to it.
What's on his plate now?
Well, he's got, I looked him up while we were watching the movie, and currently under director, he has the TV show Ash vs. Evil Dead.
That's right.
So I'm hoping he's directing like the pilot, at least, of that, and I hope that he brings back some of that Sam Raimi style.
So that's going to be Bruce Campbell, right?
It will be.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I hope it's really good. It says 2015, so sometime this year, I guess. He directed a couple episodes of a TV show called Rake, which I did not see. Did not even know that he directed some of those. And then in development, he has a movie called The Outpost, another one called Love May Fail, which for some reason is making me think... Oh, never mind. I was thinking... For whatever reason, it made me think of a video game. But I think that's Devil May Cry that I was thinking of. Is that a video game?
Devil May Cry is. I don't know the other one.
Yeah, Love May Fail I don't think is. And then Earp, Saints for Sinners, whatever that is. I think it must be a Wyatt Earp movie or something. Which Sam Raimi has done a Western. He did Set in the Future. Wyatt Earp takes on outlaws in a ravaged society where the only boomtown left is Las Vegas. Interesting.
When did that come out?
It doesn't say. It says it's in development.
Oh, it's in development.
Yeah.
Okay.
Love May Fail might have a woman returns to her hometown in the aftermath of a breakup and seeks out a retired English teacher. So that sounds like a drama. And then The Outpost is a small team of U.S. soldiers battle against hundreds of Taliban fighters in Afghanistan. So it sounds like he's got one sci-fi futuristic Western, one drama, and one war movie coming out. So that's interesting. I would, the sci-fi Western is the only one I could really see him putting kind of his Sam Raimi spin on it. And Sam Raimi's done dramas and whatnot in the past. He did one of my favorite baseball movies called For Love of the Game. And that doesn't really have any of those Sam Raimi kind of style elements to it. So, it depends on the movie, obviously. Mm-hmm. But, like I said, you can just tell he's having fun in this movie. And I really kind of miss that.
Yeah.
It's a long way to go about saying that. But
well, you did a good job.
Oh, thank you. So, after Doc Ock leaves the hospital, the first thing on his agenda, essentially, is to rebuild the machine, right?
Yeah. rebuild and get this thing going, because he has a obligation as a brilliant man to bring this, this great discovery to humanity.
Right. And during all of this, Spider-Man really has been having a hard time dealing with his life. So much so that he starts having issues with his powers. You
think that's why he has issues with his powers?
I really think it is it's because of that, him trying to find that balance, Mm-hmm. And I think it really is, I think it comes down to like the battle between living the life he wants to live and living the life he feels like he has to live. And it starts messing with his mind. And because I do believe that doctor, says he's fine.
That is true.
He points, he goes, if you ask me, it'd be all up here in your head.
That's a good scene, too.
Yeah.
Your friend's having dreams.
Right, where he goes, in this dream, I'm Spider-Man. And I love how the doctor goes, so you're Spider-Man. He goes, in the dream.
It's not even my dream. It's my friend's dream. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that a lot. So you're Spider-Man. So I think it really is psychological. It's just messing with his brain. And he just, it's a constant struggle. Can I live the life I want to? Or do I have to live the life I have to,
And that's when, in the moment of the relationship and the romance, Peter Parker is now opening up to Mary Jane, but she's tired of this, and she's moved on.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and they're never on the same page, like you said. Like, when it works out on one side, it doesn't work out on the other. And so she really wants him to be a part of her life, and he's trying in the beginning, but he just can't make it on time. He can't be there. He can't do this. He can't do that. And so when he finally, there's a point in the movie where he finally decides he's not going to be Spider-Man anymore. And it's around the time that his powers kind of are failing him a little bit.
Yeah, I think he's getting. I think you're right. Well, if you are right about, and I think you probably are, about the conflict that is going on in his life is affecting his makeup, to where he's not having the web shooting out whenever he needs to.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, it kind of does a circle, and it frustrates him while he's trying to be Spider-Man. So he's like, I'm not even going to do this anymore because I can't do it right.
Yeah, exactly. He's like, I'm putting myself in danger anyway and I don't want to. So yeah. So he finally decides to, for lack of a better term, hang up his cape and quit being Spider-Man. And that, again, is another great scene with the raindrops keep falling on my head song. And he's like at school, and the teacher points at him, and the freeze frame is just...
The freeze frame is the best part.
I remember seeing the freeze frame in the theater, and the whole theater just erupting in laughter.
Yep. The whole scene. I mean,
when
the music started, everyone just started cracking
slow motion, him walking down the street and stuff. Yeah, it was great. So he, in his mind, he's like, I can finally be with Mary Jane. He even tells her, there's something I thought I had to do. I don't have to. But it's too late. She's met somebody else.
She's getting married.
He doesn't know that yet, but he's met somebody else. And
she mentions it in that scene, doesn't she?
I thought. Well, I mean, maybe I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but he sees her. He definitely sees her with him at that little ball or whatever you want to call it. I can't remember what it's called. The event, and that's where he proposes. So yeah, I mean, I think he does try to like kind of get her back like one last time.
That is true. Yes.
And that's when she's like, I'm getting married. But at the same time, yeah, I mean, he's finally thinking, I can finally be with Mary Jane. I can finally live the life I want to live. And he can't, because she's moved on. She's given him plenty of chances, and it's just like too little too late at this point. And so now he's even like more depressed, because not only are his powers failing him, which I don't know if he's really upset about that at this point, because he's kind of seems to be somewhat happy. His school, his grades are picking up and everything. But the woman that he wants to be with is going to be with somebody else. Real side note, real quick. the introduction of J. Jonah Jameson's son, who's an astronaut. I think most of us in the theater, as soon as we found out he was an astronaut, was like, Venom.
Yep.
Venom's going to be in the next movie. And it really feels like they're setting that up. I mean, just because he's an astronaut.
Absolutely.
Anyway. And then Spider-Man 3 comes out and they don't even, that's not even part of the movie.
Doesn't it come
just
from
comes,
a falling comet or something?
Yeah, it just comes, like, it's like Peter Parker and Mary Jane are on a date, and it just, like, they're, like, getting on his little motor scooter thing, and you see it just, like, come out of the sky and hit the ground, and it, like, crawls up his bicycle. It, like, has, I mean, I guess you and I both, I mean, Spider-Man 3 is an episode we're going to definitely have to watch and talk about. But the fundamental problem with Spider-Man 3 is they just tried to fit too much into one movie.
Oh, yeah.
And so the movie
sort of
should have been either just about Venom or just about Sandman or something.
I think a big part of it, too, was Sam Raimi was not a fan of the Venom character.
He wasn't.
And the studio...
Which makes me think the astronaut thing was just coincidence.
Right. But at the same time, how could it be?
Either that or Alfred Goff, Miles Miller, and Michael Chabon or somebody, one of those guys from the story credited writers, they were hoping to plant some seeds for Venom. Mm-hmm. But either that or it's a huge coincidence. But I can't imagine it would be a coincidence.
That is funny. They're like, why don't we make him an astronaut, Sam? He's like, okay.
All right.
Okay.
Why not?
They're like, shh, don't tell him about that.
He hates Venom. And I remember reading that, like, he didn't like Venom. He didn't want to do Venom. And I get it. Venom was created, like, in the 90s, right? 80s or 90s? 80s. Well, it was after Sam Raimi was reading Spider-Man comics. So it's not a villain he grew up with like we did.
Wasn't Venom created by, who did Spawn?
Todd McFarlane?
Yeah. Believe Venom was created by Todd McFarlane.
It could be. I'll have to look it up. But the point is, I can understand why he didn't want to do the Venom storyline because it's just not one he was really a fan of. It wasn't something he grew up with like we did. It's not a character that he thought was great. He would rather do classic Spider-Man. I wouldn't have been surprised if Sam Raimi could have done Spider-Man 4, 5, and 6 or whatever. It would have been like...
I think 4 was going to be Vulture.
Vulture, and then it would have been like Mysterio. Like, let's say Venom never showed up in Part 3, and it was an amazing movie. 4 would have been Vulture, 5 would have been like Mysterio, and then 6 would have been like Rhino or something. Like, I don't think he would have ever gotten to Venom if it was up to him. So, being forced on him like that, it just obviously turned into... And because he didn't have a love for the character, he cast Topher Grace as Eddie Brock.
Right.
And then he just doesn't do it right because he doesn't...
He doesn't understand
exactly
the character.
Right. And so that was just... Whoever pushed Venom on Sam Raimi, that was just a poor choice. But would that movie have been better if it had just been Sandman and Green Goblin, James Franco? I don't know.
I don't either.
Venom's Wikipedia page, it says, created by Randy Schuler, and then in parentheses it says original idea. And then it says David, I'm not going to pronounce this name right, Michelini, and Mike Zeck, and then in parentheses it says alien costume design. And then it says Todd McFarlane, and then in parentheses it says Venom's appearance.
Gotcha.
So it was kind of a combination, I guess. Maybe it's possible maybe Todd McFarlane was the artist at the time who was doing the Spider-Man comics. And so Randy Schuler and these other guys might have been writers or, some, I don't know. I'm not entirely sure, to be honest with you. But I thought the same thing. When you said, wasn't Venom created by, the first name that popped in my head was Todd McFarlane.
Yeah.
So I thought the same thing.
And obviously you can see the resemblance.
Yeah. Todd McFarlane has a very...
Sinister?
No, that's not... like, when you look at his art, you can tell that's Todd McFarlane. Like, he has a very... Distinct style. Yeah, art style, I think. Anyway, we're getting off topic. We're talking a little too much about Venom and Spider-Man 3.
When was the last time we talked about Dr. Octopus? Sam Raimi.
Right. I'm trying to remember where we were in Spider-Man 2 that got me off track.
We were talking about the Sam Raimi scene in the hospital. Right. Well, no, we got a little past that. True. We were talking about the astronaut.
Right, and that's what it was.
Yep.
So Peter's life, and then of course to top it off at that, I feel so bad for Peter in that scene because he finds out that the girl he loves is getting married, and then right after that, Harry Osborn shows up and like slaps him across the face a couple of times because he's mad.
Drunk.
He's drunk and he's mad that he thinks Peter has more loyalty to Spider-Man than he does his own friend. Little does Harry know. So yeah, not a good night for Peter.
No, he can't get any of the hors d'oeuvres off the plates.
That's absolutely right. And it's somewhere around there that he goes and visits Aunt May and has a little talk with Aunt May. She's actually packing up and moving because she can't afford to make the house payments anymore. And
there's a neighbor that's helping her.
yeah, there's a neighbor kid. And he had seen Aunt May previously, and he had kind of confessed to being. He thinks he's responsible for Uncle Ben's murder.
Yes, I wanted to bring that up.
Right, and he tells her the story. He's like, I could have stopped this robber, but I didn't because I wanted revenge. And then he killed Uncle Ben. And you don't like her reaction. He puts his hand on her hand, and she pulls it away.
She pulls away and then walks out of the room. And it's not so much, that I can understand her maybe wanting some time to herself.
Right.
But she almost appears to just be in disgust and like disowning him.
Well, I think in that moment, she was. I mean, it's got to be tough news to hear. Peter basically tells her, if I had stopped that guy because I had every chance to, Uncle Ben would still be alive. And so, I mean, that's got to be tough to hear. And so, in the moment, I don't think she holds it against Peter by any means. But at that moment, I think she was a little upset with him. She was mad at him. Mm-hmm. And so, it's not something you don't agree with the whole pulling the hand away and walking out. But I think it was just a heat of the moment type thing. I don't think it was something that she really meant. Because I think it also was another thing that Peter, it's like something else Peter just had to have weigh on top of him. It's like, now my Aunt May hates me.
Good point. Good point.
And so I think it was just she was just mad at the moment because the very next scene we see with her and Peter is the scene where she's packing up.
Yeah.
And she has no problem with him.
Right.
I wrote this question down, but I think you asked it while we were watching the movie was, does Aunt May know?
Mm-hmm.
And I think you have to look at it because, if you think about Spider-Man 3, I don't think she knows in Spider-Man 3. But if you pretend that Spider-Man 3 does not exist and you're just watching this movie, I think she does know.
Yeah. She's giving him a pep talk.
She knows that he's Spider-Man and Spider-Man hasn't been around.
Right.
And, she even says to him, you'll never guess who he wants to be when he grows up. Spider-Man,
Yeah.
And like, she's talking about, and she even says like, there's heroes in all of us and stuff. Like you're absolutely right. She's giving him a pep talk. She is like, I don't know what's going on with you, but you need to go back out there and be Spider-Man. And I think she absolutely, I don't know how she knows exactly, unless she figured it out from the whole story about Uncle Ben's death or something, but somehow she knows that he's Spider-Man.
If she does know, which I like you said, I think she does. I think it's just showing that, your elders, your loved ones, the ones that you're close to, they just have gut feelings about things.
Uh-huh.
I think that's kind of what it was touching on.
That's another great scene, and again, Alvin Sargent does a great job writing it. Alvin Sargent, he wrote this movie, which I think is amazing. And for a long time, I was like, Alvin Sargent is an awesome writer. And then, of course, he does have a writing credit on Part 3 and The Amazing Spider-Man 1. But he doesn't have he doesn't... This one he wrote himself. The other ones have, like, Sam Raimi and Ivan Raimi co-wrote the third one with him. And then he also has a couple other different writers. So I think they brought him on Part 3 and Amazing Spider-Man 1 to try to do the best he can with the script he was given.
Yeah.
He also was married to Laura Ziskin, who was a producer of these movies. So I'm assuming she brought him who she died a few years back, I think.
Wow.
I think it was before. I think it might have been after Amazing Spider-Man 1, but before Amazing Spider-Man 2. So yeah. But anyway, a great scene written really well. Aunt May giving him the pep talk, and it still doesn't quite sink in. He's still not being Spider-Man, and it's not until Doc Ock comes and takes Mary Jane that he finally comes back and realizes that he needs to be Hugh.
No, that's not true. Because
the fire in the building.
Well, no. He has decided to take back on Spider-Man. Because that's why the whole scene with Mary Jane in the restaurant
That's true.
happens.
Yeah, that's true, I guess.
Because she's coming now to him to say...
He just hasn't gotten his costume back yet and everything like that.
And he's like, I'm sorry.
He's like, I may have spoken too soon.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. That's true.
So, but that scene in particular is... I love that scene. You got the car coming through the window.
Yeah.
And then you've got the classic Sam Raimi again.
The snap zooms.
Snap zooms with each boom of Dr. Octopus's arms. Very, very well done scene.
And, Alfred Molina kills it in that scene, talking about... It's one of the lines for that I remember from the trailer, and it's just the way he does it with all seriousness, and yet it's kind of scary. Where he's like, find him, or I'll peel the flesh off her bones. That's really great.
Yeah, and pinching the hand, one of the hands. As just to let it sink in.
Yep. Backing up just a little bit, I do have a note that says when there's that fire in the building, and
right.
he goes to undo his shirt, and then he realizes he's not wearing his Spider-Man costume, but he goes in the building anyway. And he saves that little girl. One of my favorite little moments about that scene is that he hands the daughter to the family and then doesn't even wait around at all for a thank. He doesn't expect a thank you. He doesn't want a thank you. He's doing his job, basically.
Yeah.
And I've always liked that he doesn't even give them a chance. He gives them the kid and then walks off. And I've always thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah.
It's very hero-like.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Because he's used to...
It's very selfless.
Yeah. He's used to having that suit on, and I'm assuming he doesn't get near as many thank yous as Spider-Man because he's been around for a while, and people are just kind of like...
And it probably goes with being, secret identity and all. He doesn't really want to stay around in, one spot.
True.
But speaking of that, the train sequence.
Well, I wanted to say first, the burning building, we brought it up. Every time I see that scene,
oh yeah,
I'm like, oh, Green Goblin. Wait, this is Spider-Man 2.
Wait, that was the last movie. Yeah, that's funny. The train sequence with Dr. Octopus, that whole fight sequence, is still... I mean, the CGI is 10 years old, but you can forgive that. Because that scene is incredible.
It's also a very fast moving scene,
right?
So you don't really notice the CGI. I don't think.
No, they're quick. They're definitely quick scenes. I mean, it's just every now and again you can kind of tell because even now today, 10 years later, I don't think we've perfected human body movement in CG. It looks, for whatever reason, it looks rubbery, but no, it's absolutely forgivable in the scene because it's done. It's just so well done. And it's very edge of your seat. And when he's saving the train at the end, he's got the webs and he's struggling so hard. I still, even tonight, even though I know how it ends and everything, I remember I kind of found myself kind of holding my breath.
Yeah.
Because it's just really well done.
You can put yourself in his shoes.
Oh yeah.
And you can Tobey Maguire does a great job in that scene. Mm-hmm. His face, you can just see how
hard it is.
Yeah, how hard it was to do that and stop that train.
And then to see them catch him before he falls,
love it.
And then bring him in. And then that's one of my favorite lines. I don't know why it always gets me. Is when you hear that one guy say, "He's just a kid, no older than my son."
Yeah.
Every time it just gets me.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I'm just they're every person in New York, if you live in a world that has Spider-Man, every person in New York has wondered, who is Spider-Man? And these few people have finally gotten to see him. And that guy, for whatever reason, never thought could be like this young kid. Mm-hmm. And it is.
I wouldn't have thought.
No, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, Spider-Man has one of the best costumes in comic books, in my opinion, because he's, Batman only covers part of his face. Superman doesn't cover any of his face. But Spider-Man could be anybody. Mm-hmm. Spider-Man covers his whole face, and, like, there's not even any sort of, you don't get any sort of peek at who he is underneath. I've always liked that about Spider-Man's comic. Good job, Stan Lee and Steve Ditko. And so that scene where he doesn't have his mask on and they're all seeing him, I always think about how people on that train will go home and be like, guess what? I saw Spider-Man without his mask on. And the people will be like, what? No, you didn't.
He saved us. We almost died. We were on a train.
I was on that train. No, you weren't. No, why did he have his mask off? Because there was, like, electricity, and they're like, whatever.
I always wondered in that scene how... I mean, that webbing is strong. It's ripping bricks off of buildings.
Yeah, the webbing is not snapping at all. It's actually pulling off the building. Yeah.
So later on, when Mary Jane and Peter Parker are hanging out in his little spun web that he made within a few
She doesn't
seconds.
stick to it, really.
Yeah, she's just, I'm cool.
Yeah, that doesn't make... I guess it's, again, comic book logic, I guess,
I'm totally fine with it.
I'm totally okay with it. He is eventually obviously captured by Doc Ock and delivered to Harry Osborn.
He's Dr. Octopus is apparently the only person in the entire city that is not curious who Spider-Man is.
He does not care.
He does not take off his mask before handing him over to Harry,
It's not important to him. It's the Dr. Octopus only cares about getting more tritium from Harry Osborn so that he can build his machine. He doesn't care one way or another about Spider-Man. Yep. It's not important to him at all, which is very interesting. I never thought about that either. He doesn't take off his mask and be like, I wonder who is Spider-Man.
Right. Or what kind of how many eyes do you have under there?
Right. Are you a human or are you a mutant?
Yeah.
He doesn't care one way or the other. He gives them to Harry Osborn. He's like, where do you want them? And that scene, Harry finds out that it's Peter Parker, and then of course he's stunned and everything. And you had a question. You said how? Okay, so Peter, once Peter kind of wakes up, he's like, we have to find Doc Ock because he's got Mary Jane. How does Harry know where Doc Ock is?
No idea.
And why doesn't Peter think he's probably in the abandoned building out on the coast or whatever, wherever that building is? It's like the one emitting all the light or whatever.
Right.
So I don't know how, because I don't think they've ever talked about it.
I don't remember them.
Doc Ock always came to him he came to him the first time wanting tritium. He said, Peter Parker, bring Spider-Man to me, I'll give you the tritium. But he never is like, I'll deliver it to you. What's your address?
Right. Not at the abandoned harbor.
Oh, okay, got it. All right, no problem. So that is a great question. It's kind of a little plot hole, I suppose. But for whatever reason, Harry knows, and so Spider-Man goes to save Mary Jane. And then that whole sequence is incredible because there's two moments where Peter Parker reveals that he's Spider-Man. He reveals it on purpose to Dr. Octavius. And I love that Dr. Octavius redeems himself, essentially, before he dies. And he looks at Peter Parker, and the first thing he thinks is, brilliant but lazy. He's like, I get it now.
Yeah.
Yep. I love that moment. It's such a... It's small, but it's, like, really kind of impactful, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
And because of that, and because of what Peter says to him, he decides to... he says, I'm not going to die a monster, and he decides to kind of redeem himself and save the city, if you will. And then, not on purpose, he reveals himself because he took his mask off and he was talking to Octavius, I think he turns around or something, and Mary Jane sees him without his mask on. And then, of course, and it's just, Kirsten Dunst, I think, does a fantastic job in that scene, too, because you can just see it on her face. Everything is clicking. Mm-hmm. Everything is coming into... clear view. And she's like, no wonder. He's always been late to everything.
Yep.
And he can't be with me and all this stuff. And I really thought, the first time I saw this movie, I really thought she was about to die in that scene.
Yeah.
Because you see that things start to fall, and the way Tobey Maguire screams no and stuff. I was like, oh my God, they're about to kill her. They're going to kill her off. And I was like, how much more can you do to Peter Parker? Fortunately, though, and I remember everybody laughing in that scene too, where he catches the wall from falling on her, and he's like, hi, and she's like, hi, and he goes, this is really heavy.
Yeah.
Just a laughter in the theater. It's great.
And it brings you to reality as well with, I mean, of course it's not reality, but that even this guy with superhuman strength, he's struggling, to hold these things.
Oh, yeah.
It's not just a piece of cake for him.
Right. I mean, it's like the whole side of the building.
Yeah.
So it takes a lot, because he does have superhuman strength, but yeah. He's not invincible. And I remember thinking he was gonna be like, this is really heavy, and she was just like looking at him, and I thought he was gonna be like, move.
right. I still kind of expect that every time I watch that scene for him to say something like that.
Please go. But it ends up I think the machine kind of pulls it in, because he's able to kind of push it over.
Yeah.
And I think
I didn't think about that, but yeah, you're right. I always thought he just kind of got the extra strength, and I was like,
I think the machine finally kind of pulls it out from him, and he just kind of gives it a little boost. So yeah, I had one other note that kind of goes back to the train sequence, and that was, I don't really understand why his spider sense, his spider sense usually tells him when something's about to happen,
right?
But on the train sequence, the spider sense tells him that the tracks are about to end.
Right, he has like this super far view.
Yeah, and I always thought that was a little weird.
But it's a cool shot.
But I can go with it. Yeah, exactly.
It's a cool shot. I like the shot.
That's essentially the end of the movie. Mary Jane goes to get married and leaves the guy at the altar, and then goes to be with Peter. The end.
Which I like that scene.
I think the shot of her running through the courtyard or by the fountain or whatever in the wedding dress is a tiny bit cheesy, but I get it.
I like the smile on her face.
Yeah, I do too.
It's a very moving moment.
Made her decision. And
yeah, exactly. And you're right. She's made her decision, and she no longer has that burden.
Right.
And it's just complete joy. I also like when she tells him, go get him, Tiger.
Yeah.
And then he goes out the window, and then it shows that shot of him swinging through the city, and you see Mary Jane very distant, running up to the window just kind of as the cheerleader.
Oh, really? I never noticed that before. That's cool. The very last shot of the movie, though, she's not smiling. So do you think she's a little worried about what's to come, about her life with Spider-Man?
I would assume.
Yeah.
It's a weird shot to end on.
It is.
But yeah, I think that's what they were, kind of trying to convey is the conflict's not gone.
Right. I think she's happy to be with him, but she is like, this could be tough, And I also think she's worried for him. Now that she knows he's Spider-Man, I'm sure she's constantly going to be worried every time he's out there fighting crime. So
yeah. I just wanted to say about, talk about the importance of what Spider-Man 2 was. We talked a little bit about it at the beginning, but, X-Men came out, Spider-Man, X2, and then Spider-Man 2. You had the Hulk. Was that
2003? When was that? 2003? Yeah.
I think. But there was really, these were really the beginnings of superhero movies. And I think Spider-Man 2, Spider-Man was kind of the Batman, the 89 Batman, I think, where people were...
sparked it.
Yeah. But Spider-Man 2 was the one that was like, we're going full force with these things.
And we can make them good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it really brought an excitement of what was coming.
Because, I mean, I don't think, not to say that, like, the other filmmakers didn't think that they could make good superhero movies. I'm sure every filmmaker set out to make a good superhero film. And so far, I mean, really, out of those movies you listed, there was only Bryan Singer, Sam Raimi, and then Ang Lee directed Hulk. And I don't think any of them were like, this is X-Men, so it doesn't really matter. I think they all set out to make, like, a really good movie.
Sure.
Hulk is a movie that I really enjoyed when I saw it in the theater. I recently rewatched it a few months ago. And it's a little tough to get through, but no, I think I would definitely agree with that. I think it really Spider-Man 2 kind of, you know, I don't know if it set out to say this, but it was like superhero movies can be good movies.
Yeah.
And critics,
not just for kids, for everybody.
Right. And critics and audiences were like, wow, comic book movies can be good movies. And then from then on, I think it really sparked. People
took the superhero movies really seriously after that.
Yeah.
And I think the next one,
and we're less forgiving to the bad ones now.
Yeah,
because like
exactly.
after that, like we had like Daredevil came out. I thought
Daredevil came out. Daredevil came out before Spider-Man 2, didn't it?
It might have. Maybe it was 2003. All right, so that one doesn't exactly work. But, like, you know, if you have, like, a lesser or not as good superhero movie, we're less forgiving. Like, I feel like you hear people be like, that movie was terrible. When it wasn't really that bad, it just wasn't up to our new standards.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, and I think the one that after Spider-Man 2, you had your your group of movies there, and then Iron Man came out, and that's the one that did it again.
Yeah,
Iron Man was kind of, I think, the next Spider-Man 2.
Could be. Well, Batman Begins came out in 2005.
Yes,
and Batman Begins, I think, did. It didn't have the same impact that Dark Knight had, but it was. It was up there.
I personally, I kind of separate the Dark Knight trilogy from the Spider-Man.
From superhero movies, kind of? Yeah. Well, if you do that, then I definitely agree with you with Iron Man. Iron Man, I mean, if it wasn't for Iron Man, we wouldn't have the Avengers. Because I think they were really, they put a lot of stock into Iron Man. Especially with that end credit sequence where he's like, I'm here to talk to you about the Avengers Initiative. Mm-hmm. And if Iron Man hadn't done well, then I don't think...
Yeah, they probably wouldn't have done Thor.
I don't think they would have. And I don't think anybody would have spent the money to put all those characters together.
Yeah.
So, thankfully, Jon Favreau and his team did a great job with Iron Man 1. And I think you're absolutely right. It did. People, again, were like, wow, these movies are really good. Mm-hmm. But then again, we're not as forgiving when, like, Iron Man 2, people say that movie's terrible, and it's not terrible. It's just not nearly as good as Part 1 and stuff. So.
Right.
I've even heard people say Iron Man 3 is terrible, and I don't think that's true at all. I actually really enjoyed Iron Man 3.
Iron Man 3 was not bad.
Although I do understand the problem people had with the whole Mandarin thing.
Right.
But we'll save that for the episode. I want to know what you would rate Spider-Man 2.
Back in the day, I would have given it 5 out of 5 stars. I'm going to give it 4.5 out of 5.
Back in the day, I would have given it an A+. Which I still think it's worthy of, but I'm going to knock it down to an A. Because...
times have changed.
Times have changed a little bit. But, I mean, it's a high A.
It is.
It's almost an A+.
It still blows me away to watch today.
I forgot how much fun it was, honestly, until we rewatched it. Rewatching it this time, I was like, man, this is a good movie. Like, it holds up 10 years later.
It does. Sure. It does. But, I mean, 4.5 out of 5 stars. That's
nothing to sneeze at.
Yeah.
Well, we'd love to know what you think about Spider-Man 2. Let us know. You can comment on Facebook, facebook.com/SM and SM Podcast. You can throw us a line on Twitter @CinemaHeroes, or you can go to our website, cinemaheroes.com, and leave us a comment. We'd love to know what you think about Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2. We obviously love it.
How could you not?
Right. Oh, and if you don't love it, tell us why you don't love it.
I want to know why you don't like Spider-Man 2. You better have some good reasons.
Right. We need like a detailed analysis.
Yeah. Any requests for movies?
Yeah, if there's anything, we've got a couple in mind for our next couple episodes. But if you've got any requests, let us know. We'd love to hear what you kind of would like us to talk about. As always, if you want to make any Amazon purchases, go to cinemaheroes.com. Check that Amazon banner, especially right now with Christmas time. Although I don't know when this episode's going to come up, but it doesn't cost you anything extra, and it helps. We get a tiny percentage of it, and it helps with the podcasting costs and whatnot. So that's always appreciated. I think that about wraps it up for this episode of Superheroes, Movies, and Superhero Movies. I'm Justin Speck.
I'm John Pelzel.
Thanks for listening. Thanks for downloading.